Rise, my apprentice.
The Jedi Temple hummed with the quiet murmur of training sabers clashing, the soft footsteps of younglings moving through their forms. Anakin Skywalker stood alone. From the beginning, he was different. He arrived older than the rest, more skilled, more powerful. The whispers of the Chosen One followed him wherever he went. His peers, young and eager, noticed. Some watched with envy, others with doubt. He could feel it. He always felt it. Yoda watched too, his ancient gaze ever on his student. But Master Yoda was not like any Jedi Master. He was the Grand Master of the Order, the highest authority among the Jedi. His duty stretched beyond training a single apprentice. He guided the entire Order, oversaw councils, maintained balance within the temple. He was a leader, a philosopher, and a mentor all at once. His responsibilities often kept him within the temple, tending to matters of the Order rather than venturing out on missions. In turn, this kept Anakin at the temple, his training shaped by the environment of corridors, archives, and sparring halls rather than the battlefields and diplomatic chambers where other Jedi learned. Yoda's training was unlike any other master's. It was slow, methodical, built upon patience and control. While younglings sparred and ran drills, Anakin spent hours in meditation, forced to listen, to feel. The Force flowed through him like a storm waiting to break, but Yoda taught him to hold it steady, to let the currents settle. Training sessions would begin in silence. Anakin kneeling, eyes closed. Yoda's presence barely a whisper in the Force. No commands, no instructions, just stillness and waiting. At first, Anakin resisted. He wanted action, movement, challenge, but Yoda was unmoved by impatience.
Feel the Force. You must. Trust it. Let it guide you.
Only when Anakin surrendered to the quiet would the training begin. Yoda would test his instincts, his awareness, his ability to react before thinking. Blindfolded, balanced on a single point, sensing without sight, without sound.
The Force is your ally, but only if you let it be.
Combat came only after discipline. Yoda did not spar like other masters. He was small, but his presence in the Force was overwhelming. When they trained in lightsaber combat, it was a lesson in unpredictability. Anakin would strike. Yoda was already gone. Every movement was deflected, redirected, turned against him.
Speed is nothing without clarity. Strength is nothing without control.
Again and again, Yoda would wear him down, forcing him to fight without anger, without desperation. Anakin excelled, but the temple walls felt tighter with each passing day. His mind drifted beyond them, to the world outside, to his mother left behind on Tatooine. Questions boiled within him, but Yoda's lessons always turned them aside.
Be mindful of the present. Fear leads to suffering.
The other younglings whispered when they thought he could not hear. They saw his talent as an unfair gift, a title bestowed rather than earned. They sparred with him, but rarely spoke to him. Anakin was always the best, always first. The gap between them only grew. Frustration clawed at him in silence. He wanted more than practice rooms, more than philosophy, more than the temple's endless walls. But Yoda was firm. Missions beyond the temple were rare, and when they came, Anakin was left behind. The Jedi Order did not rush training. The galaxy was dangerous, so he learned. He listened. He followed. He adapted. He buried his emotions, but they festered. He became a teacher to the others before he even became a Padawan, guiding those younger than him in their forms. Teaching came easy. Attachment leads to suffering, but instructing, that was not attachment. It was duty. It was purpose. Years passed, and the temple became his world. The faces of the Jedi, some kind, some wary, became familiar, expected. But the whispers never faded. Neither did the weight pressing against his chest. the restless longing for something beyond lessons and walls. He was learning patience, but patience was never meant for him. The galaxy turned without him, and he was not there to see it. He was the chosen one, but in the temple, he was just a student, waiting, preparing, wondering, always wondering. Anakin's years as a Padawan under Master Yoda were unlike those of any Jedi before him. While other Padawans accompanied their masters on missions, Anakin remained firmly within the temple. Yoda had ensured it. The Grand Master was deliberate in keeping him away from politics, shielding him from the influence of senators and dignitaries. The Jedi Order had no need for the Chosen One to be swayed by the Republic's manipulations. This meant Anakin never met Supreme Chancellor Palpatine beyond formal ceremonies. There were no whispered conversations, no mentorship from the shadows. The Supreme Chancellor, though respected, was a distant figure to Anakin, just another leader among many. His duties remained within the Order. While Obi-Wan Kenobi and other Jedi formed close ties with key senators, Anakin never did. He was not assigned to Padmé Amidala. He never stood guard outside her chambers. He never exchanged words with her beyond formal Jedi interactions. She was a senator. He was a Jedi. Their paths never intertwined. And so, when the attempt was made on her life, there was no Jedi Knight to protect her, no fateful mission to Naboo, no rekindled bond from childhood. She was assassinated. The loss of Senator Amidala sent shockwaves through the Republic. She had been a symbol of diplomacy, of peaceful resolution. Her death inflamed tensions between the Senate and the Separatists. Accusations flew. Some blamed Count Dooku, others suspected political rivals. The fragile peace collapsed further. The Senate's demands on the Jedi grew heavier. Anakin felt the echoes of it within the temple. The Council's discussions grew tense. Jedi left for peacekeeping missions, for investigations, for war preparations, and yet he remained behind, as he always had. But the war was coming. He felt it. A shadow stretching across the galaxy, no longer distant, but at their doorstep. Then it happened. Obi-Wan Kenobi was lost. Tracked by the Council to Geonosis, he had uncovered something far worse than political unrest. The Separatists were preparing for war under Count Dooku's command. A massive droid army built in secret, ready to strike. The Republic could not ignore it. The Jedi would intervene. For the first time, Anakin Skywalker was called to war. For the first time, he would leave the temple. The first thing Anakin noticed was the heat. The Geonosian sun burned high in the sky, baking the sands beneath his feet. The air was thick with dust and smoke, stirred by the relentless movement of battle droids and the dying screams of Jedi. Anakin moved with purpose, a blue blur of motion cutting through the metal bodies that surrounded him. Every strike of his blade was precise, efficient, devastating. For years, he had trained for this moment. Every lesson in patience, every meditation on clarity, every sparring session with Yoda had made him more than a warrior. He was a force of nature. The battlefield belonged to him. Blaster fire erupted in all directions, red streaks of energy carving through the dust. Anakin weaved between them, deflecting each bolt with ease, his mind attuned to the rhythm of combat. His movements were sharper, faster than the Jedi around him. He had spent his life training within the temple, refining every skill until they were perfect. Now, here, in war, perfection mattered. But war was not training. He saw Jedi fall, some cut down mid-strike, others overwhelmed by sheer numbers. The realization hit him like a cold wind. This was not a duel, not a test. This was death, and it was everywhere. A Padawan to his right screamed as a battle droid's blaster bolt found its mark. Anakin turned just in time to see the body collapse. He hesitated just for a moment. The first real death he had ever seen. The training halls had never prepared him for this. His hands tightened around his saber. More droids came. More Jedi fell. The droid army was endless, pouring into the arena from every direction. The survivors retreated to the center of the battlefield, their circle shrinking with every passing second. The Jedi were losing. They had walked into a slaughter. For the first time, doubt crept in. Yoda had taught him patience. He had taught him control. But control would not stop the massacre. The weight of it all pressed against Anakin's chest. His first true taste of helplessness. The blaster fire intensified. The circle of Jedi grew smaller. The droids advanced, relentless and mechanical, their numbers infinite. Surrender loomed, the reality of it setting in. Then, salvation came from above. A deep rumble shook the arena. Shadows passed over the battlefield. The air filled with the deafening roar of Republic gunships descending from the sky, and leading them, Master Yoda. The clone army had arrived. Columns of troopers poured from the transports, their white armor gleaming in the Geonosian sun. They moved with discipline, opening fire in perfect unison. Blaster fire tore through the droid ranks, turning the tide of battle in an instant. The war had begun, and with it, the Republic had found its new warriors. Anakin Skywalker watched the battlefield shift. He had entered the fight as a Jedi. He did not know what he would leave it as. The battle did not end in the arena. It had only begun. As the Republic reinforcements stormed Geonosis, the battlefield expanded beyond the walls of the Colosseum. Gunships roared through the sky, unleashing torrents of blaster fire upon separatist defenses. ATTE walkers rained laser fire upon the droid armies below, kicking up dust and flame with each blast. The separatists retaliated in full, their anti-air cannons streaking through the sky, striking down transports in fiery explosions. The war had begun in earnest. Jedi led the charge. They fought on the front lines, their sabers carving through droids as they advanced deeper into separatist territory. The clones moved in formation, precise and disciplined, working seamlessly with their Jedi commanders. The battlefield was chaos, but the Jedi adapted. They had been peacekeepers for generations. Now, they were warriors, but Anakin Skywalker was not among them. Pulled from the fray, he and Master Yoda were relocated to a forward command post overlooking the war zone. Strategists and clone commanders moved swiftly around them, monitoring troop movements and issuing commands. Maps flickered on holoprojectors, marking the shifting battle lines as the Republic pressed forward. Anakin paced restlessly, his fingers twitching at his belt, itching to grasp his lightsaber. He could feel the battle below, the heat, the tension, the cries of the dying. His fellow Jedi were down there, in the thick of it. He should have been with them. Every fiber of his being screamed to fight, to lead, to destroy the enemy before them.
Master, I should be down there,
Anakin said, his voice tight with frustration.
I can help.
Yoda's gaze did not waver from the battlefield.
Help you will, but fight now you shall not.
Anakin clenched his fists. He had waited his entire life for this moment, for the chance to prove himself beyond the temple walls. And now, when the battle was at its height, he was held back. The clones fought, the Jedi fought, but he was here, watching. He turned back to the viewport, his blue eyes narrowing at the carnage below. He could feel it, death, spreading through the Force like a ripple in water. Jedi falling, clones perishing. The battlefield was a graveyard, growing with every moment. His stomach twisted at the sensation. It was unlike anything he had experienced before. In the temple, death had been distant, abstract, but here, it was real. Yoda watched him carefully.
Feel it, you do. Death, suffering, fear.
His voice was steady, calm.
Such is war.
Anakin swallowed hard.
I don't want to feel it.
Want or not, you must.
Yoda's ears drooped slightly, his expression unreadable.
Shield yourself, you cannot. A Jedi's duty to understand suffering, to endure it.
Anakin exhaled sharply. His hands trembled at his sides. The deaths of the Jedi in the arena had shaken him, but this was overwhelming. A flood of emotions crashed through him, raw and unchecked. The sorrow of lives lost, the agony of wounded soldiers, the fear of those facing their end. It clung to him, wrapped around his chest like a vice. He closed his eyes, trying to push it away.
No.
Yoda said firmly.
Reject it, you must not. Accept it.
Anakin's breath was unsteady. The weight of it all pressed against his mind, suffocating him. He had thought himself ready for war, but he had never been prepared for this. Yoda placed a small hand on Anakin's arm.
Let go of yourself, you must. Open, you must be. To the Force. To life.
Anakin hesitated, then inhaled deeply. He let the Force flow through him, past the sorrow, past the pain. He did not push it away. He did not resist it. Instead, he let it be. The fear, the suffering, it was there, but it did not control him. It did not define him. The war continued below. The cries of the dying still echoed, but Anakin stood still, eyes closed, breathing steady. Yoda watched him for a long moment before turning back to the battle. The lesson had begun. The Clone Wars had begun, and the Jedi were needed more than ever. The Republic, unprepared for a full-scale war, relied heavily on the Jedi to lead the newly formed Grand Army. The Order, once peacekeepers, were thrust into the role of generals, leading troops into battle across countless war fronts. With so many Jedi needed, Padawans were knighted at a rapid pace, their training expedited to fill the demand for capable commanders. But not Anakin Skywalker. Despite his combat prowess and mastery of the Force, despite his actions on Geonosis, Anakin remained a Padawan under Yoda's guidance. The Grand Master still did not believe the time was right. There was more for Anakin to learn, more control he had yet to master. Yoda, unlike the rest of the Council, was patient. The war did not dictate when a Jedi was ready. The Jedi themselves did. Anakin did not see it that way. Watching his peers rise to knighthood, to command battalions of clone troopers, while he remained a Padawan, it was unbearable. Every time he stepped onto a Republic warship, every time a clone addressed him with deference, every time a Jedi Knight stood beside him, equal in skill yet higher in rank, his frustration grew. One day, the resentment boiled over.
You hold me back.
Anakin had snapped, his voice echoing through the empty halls of the temple. He had not meant to raise his voice at Yoda, but the words were out before he could stop them.
I've trained for years, fought in battle, risked my life for the Order, yet I'm still treated like a child.
Yoda had merely watched him, calm as ever.
Patience you must have. A lesson there still is.
But Anakin was done with patience. He stormed out, his emotions flaring like wildfire. He needed air, space. He needed something real. His mind burned with one thought, one desire that consumed all others. His mother. For years, she had remained in the shadows of his thoughts. He had dreamed of her, wondered if she was safe, if she was waiting for him. But the war had pulled him further from her, and Yoda's lessons had kept him focused on the present. Now, with his anger surging, she was the only person he wanted to see. It was reckless. It was selfish. But he no longer cared. Ignoring orders, Anakin took a ship and set course for Tatooine. When he arrived, the truth shattered him. Shmi Skywalker was gone. She had been taken by the Tusken Raiders, and she had died. But it had happened long ago, so long that her body was never recovered. The desert had claimed her, leaving no trace, no burial site, no final goodbye. He searched endlessly, scouring the sands for any sign of her. He went to the Lars homestead, where he learned the full story. She had been held by the Tuskens for weeks before she perished. Her suffering had gone unanswered. Anakin had arrived too late. There was nothing left of her. The realization struck deeper than any wound. His mother, the one person in the galaxy who had loved him unconditionally, was gone, and he would never even see her face again. The rage threatened to consume him. His breath was ragged, his hands shaking, his heart pounding with fury and sorrow. For a fleeting moment, the darkness called to him. He could feel it, whispering that someone should pay, that he should unleash his anger, that the Tuskens deserved his wrath. But then he remembered Geonosis, the death that had surrounded him, the lesson Yoda had given him, the way he had been forced to let it flow through him rather than control him. He had felt grief before, and he had survived it. He had learned to let go. Tears stung his eyes, but he did not break. He knelt in the sands where his mother had once walked, closed his eyes, and breathed. He let the pain exist, but he did not let it control him. For the first time in his life, Anakin Skywalker faced loss without losing himself. When he returned to the Jedi Temple, he did not hide what he had done. He approached Yoda and told the truth.
I went to find my mother.
He admitted, his voice even.
She's gone, but I was able to let go.
Yoda studied him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he nodded.
Strong you have become. A trial this was. Pass you have.
For the first time, Yoda saw something different in Anakin. A Jedi who had an attachment, lost it, and yet did not fall. It was an anomaly. It was unexpected. But perhaps Anakin Skywalker was onto something the Jedi had failed to understand. When the Council learned of Anakin's journey and his ability to face such loss, they did what they had been hesitant to do before. They knighted him, not because of his skill in battle, not because of the war's demands, but because he had undergone a personal trial, one that had shaped him more than any battlefield ever could. Anakin Skywalker was no longer a Padawan, and now he would take his place in the Clone Wars as a Jedi Knight and General of the Republic. That's the end of part 1. If you enjoyed it and want to see part 2, be sure to hit the like button. Once we reach 500 likes, I'll make the next part. Also, let me know in the comments whether you'd prefer a dark side or light side ending.